Day 3 of the 2024 U.S. Chess Championships saw the third round of classical action with multiple decisive games in both sections. Jumping into the results, starting with the Open, top seed and defending champion Fabiano Caruana managed to pick up his first win of the event, defeating Ray Robson with the black pieces. Also scoring his first full point was Hans Niemann, who won a nice attacking game against Liang Dominguez. Awonder Liang won as well to share the lead as he defeated Levon Aronian. So that means we have 5 players tied for the lead with 2 out of 3 points, including Caruana, So, Niemann, Sevian, and Liang. In the U.S. Women's Championship, top seed Carissa Yip stayed perfect with her third straight win, defeating 2-time champion Jennifer Yu. Keeping pace was Tatev Abrahamyan, who won against Pourkashiyan to stay a half point behind Yip on 2.5 out of 3. Going into the games, we'll start with the game between Robson and Caruana. This one came out of a Queen's Gambit declined, and the position here is actually roughly balanced, although it looks optically very nice for White, who has some advanced knights in the position. But it turns out Black has his own trumps. He has the c4 square, as well as counterplay with a5 lurking in the position. So here Ray went for e4, which is definitely a very committal pawn break as he looks to open up the position. Caruana took, bishop takes e4, trades on e4, knight takes e4, and now rook to c1 is coming, which looks very unpleasant for Black. But here comes f6, and this move turns out to actually turn the tables around completely, as White has to remove the knight from e5, and all of a sudden Black is getting the knight to d5, the pawn on b4 is weak, and a5 is coming as well. So knight f3 happened in the game, and now a5, a3 from White, takes, knight d5, and this position turns out very, very difficult for White to actually hold in practice. So it turns out things were basically equal up until this point. e4 might have just been a mistake from Ray. After takes, the position is still defendable for White, but it requires some very, very computer-like moves. So it's already actually getting quite unpleasant here. So knight f3, a5, a3, takes, knight d5, knight c5, rook e8, queen c2, and rook a3, all of Black's pieces coming in, rook c1. At this point, Caruana could have actually sacrificed on f3 and then taken the h-pawn, and that is a big advantage for Black. But he decides to keep it simple. He just plays queen f5, opting for the endgame where White's b-pawn is going to be very weak, d-pawn is weak as well, and it's just difficult for White to actually get to this c6 pawn. So Robson trades rook to b3, but now Black simply reinforces the rook on a3, and long-term this b-pawn is falling. So g4 was a try from White, but now bishop takes c5. White has to take on a3, Black recaptures, takes on c5, takes on f3, takes on f5, and now rook c3, very nice move from Caruana, defending c6 and offering White this endgame with knight versus bishop, which would basically just be losing for White as all of their pawns are weak and Black's king can just march to c4 and slowly convert this. So this would essentially be losing. Robson decides to take and go bishop d6, but Caruana shows very nice technique here as he simply brings in the king. All of these endgames with rook takes c4 are just losing for White, but eventually Black brings the king to d7, and now White is losing one of these pawns on the queen side. So king e4, Black takes on b4, and now he's a pawn up, still has all the advantages from before, and the game ended here after king e6. f5 checkmate was the threat. Robson had to take on g6, but now king f7. Black picks up a piece due to the double attack. So very nice game from Fabiano, picks up his first win of the event and lands himself into a share of the lead with multiple other players. One of those players is Hans Niemann, who won a very, very interesting game here against Dominguez. This one came out of the Italian game with Hans playing White. And here, Black's last move, knight h5, definitely posed a challenge to Hans, which he certainly picks up as he throws his pawn forward here with g4. Very, very aggressive, very risky decision, but it ends up paying off. Now, if Black were to play knight to f4 here, this is possibly playable, but it seems like white is better after takes, trades on c6, and then either queen to d2 or e5 here. It looks like white is a bit better just due to the structure. Instead, black played knight to f6 back, and now g5, just launching forward, opening up the g file. And this position ends up being very, very dangerous for black as white starts attacking on the g file. This f2 pawn is basically poisoned. I think at this point, after queen e6, rook g2, black needed to take on g5 according to the computers and play queen to h6. And this seems to be a holdable position. But yeah, very difficult position, I think, for black to play. Dominguez instead goes knight e7, bringing the knight to g6. But now bishop to d2, Hans gets the chance to bring the bishop back, and he just starts building up on the g file. So rook to g4, rook a g1. Black is trying to improve his position, but black doesn't really have any counterplay here. And now white is slowly building up. He's preparing h4, h5. And yeah, black just has huge problems on the g file. So this is already very, very difficult for black. Rook to g2, just covering the f pawn. Bishop d8, trying to defend. But now c5, opening up this diagonal for the bishop. Black takes this one. h4, now attacking from the h file. And here Dominguez just tries to keep things together. But h5, knight e7, rook takes g7. Everything here is kind of collapsing. Black could give up the queen for the two rooks, but that position is basically just losing after takes. Knight takes e5. White's queen is just too strong. Black's king is too weak, and white has a decisive advantage here. So Dominguez tries rook to g8, but now rook to g3 from Hans, very clever move. If black were to trade on g3, then white wants to take back with the f pawn, and then just push g4, g5, and this pawn advance is very, very strong for white, and white is again winning. So b5 was the try from black. At this point, the players are in time trouble, both around 5 minutes, but white's attack now becomes very strong. Knight to g5, black trades, bishop takes g5, queen e6, queen to f3, eyeing this f6 square. Here, black had to play king h7 to keep the game going, and then white has a winning advantage, but would still have to work here to convert. I think queen f6 is a decent move, b3 as well is playable, but definitely the game would continue. Instead, Dominguez blunders with knight c8 here, and Hans pounces on his opportunity. Bishop f6 check. Nice tactics to end the game, opening up the rooks on the g file, and that's it. Basically, black is just losing the game. Bishop takes f6, rook g8 was played, king h7. Now there's lots of winning moves. Queen g3 here, definitely good enough. Hans found rook e8, which was a nice way to end the game, as in case of queen takes rook. White doesn't go queen takes f6, but actually more accurate, queen f5 check first. The king has to move somewhere that allows queen takes f6 with check, and then, of course, mate on g7. So very nice win by Hans, as he also gets himself into a tie for first after 3 rounds. Moving on to the U.S. Women's Championship. Here, of course, big game of the round was between Carissa and Jennifer Yu, Jennifer being the 2-time champion. Carissa here playing white, and she goes for the open Sicilian. Jennifer chooses the dragon. Definitely a very, very risky line, as there can be a lot of complications in this opening. And here, Jennifer decides to play an early h5. These lines have become very, very trendy these days, where white isn't allowed to play g4 super early, but nevertheless, these positions get very, very complicated very quickly. So castles, bishop d7, king to b1, a6, and now knight to d5. Very logical play from Carissa, who just tries to trade off the knight on f6, and eventually is just developing here with bishop to c4. Knight e5 played. Now white goes bishop to g5, putting pressure, looking to trade on f6 and double black's pawns. Black took on d5, ed5, queen to c7, rook to e1. And now the position becomes very difficult for black. At this point, best was to just castle, allowing white to take on e7, with the idea that black just wants to sacrifice this pawn in order to get the pieces out. Rook e8, bishop g5, and rook c8, for example, or b5. And apparently black has fantastic compensation here. Really, really difficult to figure this out over the board, but what Jennifer ends up doing here definitely doesn't look better, as she plays f6 in order to prevent white from being able to take on e7, bishop h4, and now castles queenside. But this ends up being extremely risky, as black's king on the queen side is very vulnerable. At this point, Carissa just starts launching the attack. Bishop f2, f4, Bishop h6, h3, nice move, stopping knight to g4 here. Knight c4, and now queen to b4. And yeah, black's position here is just kind of falling apart. e7 is hanging, c4 is hanging. Here, black tries b5. Now a4 definitely was a nice move, just undermining the knight on c4. But Carissa goes for a much more direct. Bishop takes c4, queen c4, and now queen a5, just hitting this pawn on a6. The point is, if black plays king to b7, white could take on e7 here, but much stronger is just knight to c6, where queen b6 check is coming in because of the bishop on f2, and black's queen side is just falling apart. So queen takes d5 is tried, probably the best defense, but now rook takes e7, queen to b7, queen c3 check, king to b8, and a very nice combo here, rook takes d7. After queen takes d7, knight c6 check, white is winning back the exchange. If rook takes d7, then also knight c6 was the point, and then the rook on h8 is hanging. So white is winning back all the material with interest. So queen takes, knight check, king e8, takes. Now material has equalized, but white gets queen a5 at the very end, and there's no good way of defending the a-pawn because white is hitting the pawn and the rook on d8. If king to b7, then queen to b6. Check once again, and the queen will take on a6. So black tried bishop takes f4, but now white takes this one. Queen b6 check, rook to d1, and at this point, the position might have been holdable with the engine, but really, really hard to play this position, especially in time trouble. Both players here down to under 5 minutes. And yeah, running out of time. So very, very difficult to defend this with such a weak king. Rook e5, queen c4 check, and pretty soon Carissa just hunts down the enemy king, also picks up this bishop on f4, and at this point it's basically just over. The players played a couple more moves, but yeah, once they got to the time control, it was all done. Queen a6, and yeah, that was it. So very nice win from Carissa. She stays perfect with 3 out of 3 as she tries to repeat and win her second straight U.S. Women's Championship title. So that takes us into tomorrow's round 4. We have a number of key matchups once again. In the women's section, 8-time champion Irina Krush will have white against Carissa Yip. So huge pairing there. And then in the open, we have Caruana playing against Mishra with the white pieces, Shankland white against Niemann, and then a number of interesting pairings there as well. Should be another very, very exciting round, and hopefully I'll see you folks back here for the recap. Until then, take care.